So today, thank you all again for joining us. I'm here to talk about the future of work, which involves quite a bit of AI. So to talk about that today, our hosts today, we have Jeff Lortz, CEO of ProcessMaker, Alex George, our CTO, Head of Technology and Product, and Brian Reel, founder of ProcessMaker. And each of them is going to take you through some very interesting updates on AI and how we're using that here at ProcessMaker. So without any further ado, Jeff, take it over.
Thank you very much, MK. And thanks everyone for joining the webinar today. We are very excited to discuss generative AI and how it's disrupting the software industry and its positive impact and potential. During the webinar, Alex, our CTO, is going to focus on how AI is unlocking the potential, right, of automation and productivity improvement. He'll also talk specifically about AI-enabled capability that's new in ProcessMaker Platform, and talk a bit about the future capabilities and roadmap as well. And then Brian will make it all real, no pun intended, with a product demonstration. But first, I'd like to provide maybe a little bit of context. Go to the next slide. Awesome. So McKinsey, the big consulting firm, did a study recently. It was a survey, and what their goal was to try to correlate, the opportunity with generative AI with different industry sectors. And you can see, from this heat map, albeit a little bit difficult to read, there are a number of industries that have a stronger correlation to AI impact than others. You can see the banking. Energy in education, telecommunications, seem to have a stronger correlation. But the one that has the strongest correlation, clearly, right, is high tech, and this is fairly obvious. You could build out the next click. Thank you very much. So, from a high tech perspective, there's obviously a massive amount of opportunity that's being generated by generative AI, and in software specifically. There's a complete disruption, right, of the traditional software models. AI is enabling the development of more intelligent, adaptive software solutions. And I'm actually going to discuss some of those specifically in the next slide. But also, it's really changing the demand for advanced skills and the types of skills that software companies need in order to keep pace with the opportunity in AI. Traditional developers are being somewhat replaced by data scientists and developers with specific skills around machine learning frameworks like TensorFlow and PyTorch, as examples. There's also a significant amount of consolidation going on in the market, in addition to some of the challenges that startups have today with just getting funding and getting their operations off the ground. AI startups that represent, innovative new solutions are being, acquired pretty quickly by some of the larger players in the market. So just in 2023, as an example, Snowflake bought 4 AI startups. Google bought Photomath, Adobe bought Rephrase AI, Databricks bought Mosaic ML, and the list goes on and on. And you can see that the race is on to integrate as much artificial intelligence capability into these platforms as possible and as quickly as possible. And then lastly, there's real opportunities, evolving in specific industries. So for example, in healthcare, there's a number of tools and software programs that are being deployed for things like diagnostic tools. There's personalized medical assistance, right, that are becoming available. Drug discovery and development is being accelerated, by AI, and there's a number of patient monitoring and care, applications, right, that are now available that really leverage the generative AI capability in their products. You go to the next slide. So talking specifically about those disruptive models, in software, the biggest one is, the ability to automate software development itself. The ability to write, and review code, automate testing, even do some debugging, right, is, really accelerating the speed at which software can be developed and deployed, which, makes the race, for supremacy even more challenging. Tools, AI tools like GitHub Copilot, right, are able to suggest snippets and even write entire functions. Developers are changing, really what they do every day, from writing lines of code to overseeing and integrating AI generated code, which is a complete shift in paradigm. The availability and ability to process data real time, specifically end user data around preferences and behaviors, is really driving the opportunity to provide personalization and an improved user experience in software. So if you think about personal assistants like Grammarly, which saves my bacon on a daily basis, Google Maps, which probably saves all of our bacon on a daily basis, learns our travel behavior and habits. Chatbots and virtual assistants become sort of the primary interface for many websites and support mechanisms. Location-aware mobile apps, another example that we use for enhancing things like shopping experiences. Then augmented reality is another aspect of personalization that offers things like facial recognition, which is really changing the game in areas like fraud detection as well. The ability for AI to quickly assimilate and analyze both structured and unstructured data is really improving traditional BI tools' ability to do predictive analytics, beyond just reporting. And that also is something that's supporting automated decision-making as well. All of the BI vendors like SAS and Tableau now have predictive analytics capabilities, and tools like Azure Machine Learning Studio are available now for developers to actually build these predictive models. And then lastly, natural language processing has been a game changer for a while. It's really revolutionizing, the way humans and computers interact, and it's enabling much more intuitive user interfaces. So you can think of examples like search bots like ChatGPT, on-the-fly language translations, voice to text features, and even the ability for note-taking apps to listen to conference calls and actually take notes, right, that are usable after the call. So some pretty disruptive and innovative things are available now in AI. And what I'd like to do now is pivot to Alex, who's going to talk more specifically about the business process automation space, what the opportunities are there, and then how we're actually leveraging those in the product.
Awesome.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And thank you for kind of the setup there. It really kind of sets the context of how the whole space that we live in is fundamentally shifting as AI, and specifically generative AI, has begun to affect the way software is being built. And to further the point that Jeff has made, there's 3 or 4 statistics I was hoping to kind of walk you through that really set that context. The first is just to give you a view of how quickly the space is growing, right? What we're seeing is really an expectation that in the 5 years between 22 and 27 or 4, we're expecting to see about $1 billion in growth in just the business process automation space. And this is going to be impacted by really effectively building better framework, better tools, pre-trained libraries that will help accelerate development, and then automation to help generate the code that's required to actually drive automation of the code that's going to be used to be able to drive longer term automation, and then better data integration, right? And those accelerators throughout the process will really help us as software companies continue to deliver that progress for clients. Gartner, as you saw in kind of the BPA market guide, really suggests and keeps reinforcing that process optimization is really focused on driving 2 things, right? Reducing cost, improving efficiencies, both of which drive to the underlying productivity needs of the firm. The goal always is to continue to take steps that improve our productivity, that allow us to focus on tasks that require more thinking, require the reorganization of a set of steps in a process versus just executing the process itself. And we're beginning to see more and more of that of that focus. And as you see in a few minutes, this is a core area where we're spending time, where we're trying to focus on building more efficient, more effective tools. McKinsey obviously found out that, by integrating AI, operational costs actually come down in a super meaningful way. And these costs, I mean, 20% is a really significant level of savings, especially in just a single effort. Over time, as the generative AI capabilities get better, our expectation is that you'll see these improvements continue to increase. So it's not just a one-time 20% gain, it's a continuous improvement built right into the process itself. And then finally, we're really seeing about a focus within enterprises in building and using tools that provide AI capabilities. And over the next 2 years, I think 75% of the respondents in this Gartner survey are planning to invest in these tools, right? So this is exactly the time to be building tools and building capabilities on this basis. So as we kind of go through this, we really think that for business process systems or management suites, AI is going to be a core component. And we're really thinking of those components in two formats, two large, I guess, efforts from our perspective as a company. The first is that 2023 was the year of designer AI. And what I mean by that is, all the builders, the designers of processes needed AI tools. And that's really where ProcessMaker has focused. And this fall release is really a culmination of those capabilities. The first of those capabilities, which we've released a little while ago, but has really become popular, has been the idea of being able to translate complete apps, complete processes in the language of the user and in multiple languages, completely using AI. So the days of having to go through the whole app and manually manage translations and manually manage translation files is really a thing of the past. And being able to do this at scale allows really transformational efforts in terms of both time and energy spent in building apps that allow for the level of personalization that each user would want. Being able to do this also allows for manual adjustments to follow through later, so users can check on that translation and make modifications as they get feedback from end users. The second set of capabilities I want to spend a few minutes on was the idea of a modeling assistant. And Brian will show this to us in a few seconds, but the whole idea here fundamentally is that creating processes should be pretty straightforward. We want users to be able to not think of the perfect design and then build it once. We want them to be able to experiment and iterate and try different combinations and have the software build a process for you. Doing this allows the user or the designer real advantages in terms of both time and speed, but also allows us to start not start from a blank slate, but start from, built, right? So continue to build from what already exists. The effort or the capability obviously also allows for modifications and adjustments to the original design. But we're finding that this process alone really creates, 2 or 3 big categories of improvement. The first is just, you don't have to start from scratch, so you don't feel like that initial inertia. And the second is you can iterate quickly and try multiple examples and potentially run processes that are, slightly different, but 2 or 3 versions of the same concept. The second set of capabilities we focused on has been to build an assistant that'll actually help write scripts. This obviously has been, and writing scripts is obviously a complicated part of the application and usually requires a level of precision that designers don't have on day one. So being able to generate a script from natural language, being able to iterate on that script, being able to go through and actually look at notes that explain the script in step-by-step notes, and then to be able to make sure it conforms with the best practices and make sure that it runs efficiently are all possible now. So, that uncertainty that most designers would start with until they become experts, obviously, around script development now happens almost immediately and really offers kind of an advantage in terms of, you go from being a novice to being, what should I say, a reasonably seasoned script writer in a very short period of time, as opposed to having to, do this for, I guess, the 10,000 hours that everyone suggests is required. The third set of capabilities we focused on has been really around building screens. And the whole idea here again is that instead of spending a significant amount of time building these from scratch for every use case, we think that natural language will allow us to build a useful script and to be able to iterate on that script over time. So now putting an app together instead of taking, days should take, much less than 4 hours to be able to get a first version out and then allow the company or the designer to begin to iterate with users on what improvements, she'd like to see made throughout the platform. This also, not only increases the speed of delivery, but we think really allows, for the designer to focus on the end user need, to focus on personalization, and to, experiment, to really iterate effectively by making this much easier to use. The next step for us is to focus on the user, right? We focused on the designer through 23, so 24 is really going to be focused on how we can continue to improve the user experience. And Jeff pointed this out at the beginning when he was, speaking of the real focus areas or the 4 focus areas that are happening in AI. This is a larger goal set. I wanted to point out a couple quick things. The first is really the idea of being able to do A/B testing at scale, and I'll show you that in more detail. But then to be able to use those A/B tests to drive automated process optimizations. Another concept you'll see across the bottom is the idea of next best action. Not only do we want to implement next best action without requiring the huge statistical models that were previously required to be able to do something like this, but then to be able to take those next best actions and be proactive about them. So not just wait for the user to start them, and then be able to automatically approve those next best actions based on how users have asked for this in the past. So speaking of next best action, one of the huge issues here is that when, as a user, we look at our number of tasks in ProcessMaker or similar, it's just can be overwhelming, right? There can be a ridiculous number of expenses to approve. There can be a ridiculous number of POs to approve. Being able to organize those, it could be a significant, amount of data that the user has to be able to absorb that kind of leads to cognitive overload when making a decision, for example, on how best to help a banking client or how best to help a passenger on an airline. And in each of those moments, the software should make a suggestion to the user. The software should be able to organize all those POs. It should be able to organize all those expenses. It should be able to recommend the next best product or the next best step for that consumer at the bank or that passenger on the airline. And that's really where we focused. We focused on making sure the software, ProcessMaker, can organize the relevant elements of data and then make a recommendation. It can watch whether the user chose to accept that recommendation and the outcomes of the recommendation. Was the user better off with that recommendation or without? And we'll be able to learn from this and continue to improve the kinds of recommendations that are made based on the data set. This is like the perfect AI space because, instead of making these decisions based on 5 or 6 or 7 data points, we can now make them based on every data point we have in the context of POs or in the context of expenses or in the context of airlines or the customer's journey with financial products. The second big step for us that we want to focus on is A/B testing. And the concept here is that, look, we don't ever really know if a process is optimized. And the businesses we all work in are fundamentally alive. They change. And as they change, the processes should change with the business. And the idea right now of going back and changing those processes is always a difficult one, right? It takes effort to go back and modify every process. And even after the modifications, we don't know if we got it totally right. So let's experiment. Let's make it really easy for users to be able to look at 2 variations of a process and run them both. And we can define what what values we want that really articulate the improvement of a process. Is it how fast it runs? Is it the number that happened within a certain SLA? Is it cost? We can use those factors to begin to determine whether version A or version B was better, and then promote, version B to being the standard process as we find out that it, hopefully is in fact better. Being able to do this, also you'll be able to identify how much traffic you go to A versus B, and learn and run tests in that format. Again, this is a place where we think AI has a really significant advantage. The old ways of doing A/B testing are really manual. Now we can kind of be much more intelligent about deciding where we modify the processes and where the processes themselves identify or appear to have the greatest weakness. The next step for us is proactive processes. And the focus here really is to make it easy for users to be able to not just have to remember to do something, right? Students at a university shouldn't have to remember that it's time to begin to think of graduation. The university can absolutely run a process that proactively identifies that for the student. And that can be everything from getting ready for graduation after 3 or 4 years to much more modular, small decisions around, preparing for courses that you want to take next semester versus preparing for, even just making sure that fees are applied and fees are paid and applications go in on time for work or for internships or for any one of those smaller events. That's in the context of university. Of course, this is so much more powerful in the context of a business, and making sure that each of us gets the reminders we need to kick off the right processes in the context that best fits. And these can be kicked off both in terms of by timing as well as by the place the customer or the user is in her journey in the complete set of processes that they're running at at each of these institutions. The whole idea fundamentally is that we want to be able to build all the tools, and we fully appreciate that only at a subset of our clients will we be all the tools, but we will integrate obviously with other, and we do integrate with others, but it's to offer our clients all the tools they need to be able to continually improve a process. So it's not just the BPA and the client has to go elsewhere for the AI. The client can use our BPA with our AI, with our decision engine, or a third-party decision engine and our IDP. And this ability to plug and play tools, we think really will help clients accelerate their ability to execute, to deliver on the kinds of savings that we showed earlier in the deck. So I'm going to hand over to Brian now, and he's going to walk us through a couple of quick examples in this context.
Great. Well, thanks, Alex. Thanks, Jeff. Let me share my screen. Here we go. All right, you should be seeing my screen now. So really exciting. I think the vision of where the market's headed that Jeff presented, and the vision of where our product is headed that Alex has presented and developed and orchestrated with his team is really exciting. I mean, I think we really have a really interesting perspective on how this can help our new users and our existing users. I see in the audience a number of names that I recognize that have been ProcessMaker customers for many years now and have very big implementations in a variety of industries. So glad to see a lot of familiar faces on this webinar. So I'm going to basically take about a little bit more than 10 minutes here and just give a little bit of a live version, which means there could be some errors as a user, and show some of what Alex was pointing out in his slides. So for those of you who haven't yet seen the fall release, by the way, I would also recommend a webinar we did a couple of weeks ago that was led by our head of product, Jose Maldonado. Really great, dives a little more deeply into the product. So this will be a little bit more of a higher level look. So first, you can see there's a number of kind of new tabs. By the way, the analytics now are really kind of interesting in ProcessMaker, getting more interesting every minute and every release. But we're going to really look at the designer, because as Alex said, 2023 was AI and the year of our focusing on the designer experience using AI. So first thing you notice when you move into the designer screen is that we've made a couple changes. Some that are just really nice and useful. So first of all, the organization. Most of you will recognize, if you're existing users, this idea of your process assets, processes, screens, scripts, decision tables. So our rules engine is relatively new, and data connectors. And we'll be making some big announcements around the way we connect to other systems, I think in one of the upcoming webinars. But those are your main assets. But what we've added is this idea of projects. So this is kind of a really useful idea for organizing things. So you can see we're going to color code things so you can more easily find your scripts, screens, decision tables, and connectors, and the process that goes together. That is what we would then call a project. That in BPMN lingo is called a project. So you now have this ability. So we're going to add a project, and we're going to kind of create something around job application and onboarding process, which is pretty common. And again, I see a couple of our users out there. Some call it by different names. So this could be an account opening process for a bank. It could be a new user onboarding process, or for a telco provider or a utility company. We'll use this more kind of generic term of job application and onboarding, and we will add that as our project name. So now we've got, we can see the job application and onboarding process. And then just to reemphasize again, so that is a project that's listed down below, and then I can start adding my assets. So here I'm going to create a new process. When I start creating a new process, we have a couple ways you can do that. So as Alex mentioned, we're trying to find a way so you don't necessarily have to start with just a blank slate, and that would be build your own, but some of you might want to do that. Others might want to use our library. So we have now a very extensive library, a gallery of templates, and these are really useful and really well built. But of course, here we're going to talk today more about the generative AI. So let's go to the generative AI way to build a process. And you can see here what will become familiar to you throughout our solution. It is our AI assistant, the ProcessMaker AI assistant. So here we're going to build a job application and employee onboarding process. So let's start with that, something pretty generic. And let's hit generate and see what happens. You can see below where it's generating, there are a couple hints on how you can be more specific if you're looking to get specific elements into your design. But we can be as generic as we want. So here with just that basic description, we actually got something that, well, it's pretty darn complete if you look at it. So start a job application, submit the application, it'll get reviewed, application accepted, then we're going to conduct the interview, prepare the offer, send the offer, complete some onboarding forms, provide an employee handbook. That's great. I wouldn't have thought to do that. Assign equipment and schedule orientation. So this is pretty good. Maybe we like it. Maybe we want to try something else. Build a job application and employee onboarding process that includes a KYC and background check on the applicant. Yeah, let's do that and regenerate, see what happens. So now we're regenerating. You'll see in a moment here, we've got a history of what we've generated. So we will get some level of variability. We might like the previous one a little better. And we might say, okay, this is great. Looks pretty good. This one's a lot simpler. Let's generate it in French. We had some of our French customers that we were speaking with today. And we pointed out that, hey, now you can do everything. And as Alex pointed out, not only can we translate the process itself, you can translate everything in the process. And now it's done with just a click. So there you go. For those of you that speak French, it's really well labeled, which is also something that's nice because we do like to see a certain type of labeling. But let's go back and let's say that we really like the first one. So let's go back to that one and let's use this model. So we've already got a name and a description for it. Let's add it to our project that we created. And we won't create a process manager for this for now. And so now by saying we're going to use this model, this is dropping us into our modeler. So we've now gone from that sort of just high-level design phase into a modeler where it's got more of the elements you might recognize. So it has all of our elements, the tasks, the events, the gateways. So those are the main BPMN elements. Then we have some specialized ones that we built. So a DocuSign connector, our intelligent document processing connector, actions by email. You can even add an AI generated task, and then you can decide what you want this this task to do. So, will it be a screen, a script, or a sub process? So you can actually access the AI from here as well, which is really interesting. In fact, let's why don't we add a well, we'll go to that there in a moment. And what we can also do is add what we call PM blocks. Any process we build can be saved and then shared as what we call a PM block. So a PM block is a really important concept for large enterprises that are going to have a center of excellence designing some of those core building blocks. In this case, we call them PM blocks that'll then get shared with other people that are going to want to design. For those of you that are partners or prospective partners, this is the place where you would take some of your know-how or a connector to a system that's unique to you or your customers, and you could build a PM block that can encapsulate logic and API connectors and script tasks, and then you can share it. So anything we build, we can share as a block. So in this case, we're gonna actually start, and for the interest of time, we're gonna assume that we want to make this process available via the web because it's a job application process. So we are going to start with something called a web entry, and we're going to allow for an anonymous web entry. And what we want to do in the web entry is add a screen. So we don't yet have our screen, so we're going to create a new screen. When we drop into the screen, we're going to say this is the job application screen. Allow prospective employees to apply for a job. Again, well, we're going to make this a form, and we're going to associate this with the job application and onboarding process. And we're going to save it and open the screen. And now in the screen builder, you'll see lots of familiar controls. There's everything from your standard text controls, date pickers, file download, file upload, Google Places, nested screens, multi-column, signatures, submit buttons. But the new one here that's kind of fun to use, and we're going to use today, is our AI generation tool. So again, looks very similar, and that is purposely built that way so you can become familiar with our AI agent. And here we're going to say build a job application form that a business can put on its website to receive applications, right? That's kind of the purpose. So this would be something we would embed in our website or share via SMS or WhatsApp or some other mechanism. So now we're going to start generating. And again, you'll find a similar view here. Our AI is thinking, it's generating what we've asked for. And again, we can get really specific. We can ask to use certain fields. We can ask for subdivisions in our form. And this is, the process generation is very useful, but this might actually be even more useful because it can be pretty tedious to build a form. So full name, email, phone number, cover letter, resume upload, position. Let's preview this. So full name, we can now test that. So put my name in. The nice thing about testing is you can see the value that it takes, Brian, and you can see the variable name, full name 103. So I could also copy this. There's all sorts of new testing tools in this version that we won't go over today, but you can take this JSON object and then use it to populate your tests, which is really interesting. And I can also test and see what it's going to be like on the mobile. Or I can go back to my design, and again, we've accepted this. Maybe we will just add a submit button on the bottom. And so you might want this outside, and we'll call this get a new job, and publish this. And now we've got our preview. So we've got our initial form that we will either put on our website or share somehow. And now if we go back to the designer and go back to our job application process, so we'll go back into our job application process here. And just to review with you where you would put these. So again, in the web entry that we have here, just to remind you, we did create this screen. So the screen associated is the job application screen. We might want a screen for completed. saying, thank you. Then we've got this, this URL, which we can copy to start this from an exterior site. And then we will, then we might want to put our script somewhere. So we might say, okay, let's add a task and make this into a script task. So we're already submitting, and we'll say, let's run that script we built. And that's that risk calculation script. And so we will come in here and say, I think this was calculate job application risk calculator. So now we've got that, we'll publish that. So we're going from a form to a script, and then we would keep building out the rest of the process. And basically what that then will end up looking like is something like this. I will log out. And open another tab and just grab my web entry link. And I generated another form earlier. This is what kind of the experience would then look like. So now I've got my employee onboarding form, and this is our form. We're going to sign it. We provided the background check information, and we're trying to get a new job, checking your background. And then we might tell the applicant, congratulations, Michael, you passed our background checks and you can move to the next step. And then of course we'd have the subsequent steps. So with that, I think we want to open it up for questions, and I will stop. And again, apologies for the browser issues, but I think that's all part of the fun of giving live demos. So MK, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us again. We are now going to answer some questions. We've gotten a few through the Q&A. Please feel free to continue to add those. Our panel here, Brian, Alex, and Jeff, are all going to be answering questions for us. I'm going to go ahead and start with the first one I see here in the chat. Does the process diagram generator, I believe that's the AI assistant in Modeler, does it support swim lanes?
I'm happy to field that. So you can add swim lanes. I don't know, Alex might know if you specify add swim lanes when you're AI generating it. I don't know if we've added that element yet, but you can add them afterwards once you import it.
You can add, to Brian's point, you can definitely add them after you import it, but it does not generate during the AI process.
Excellent. And along those lines, another AI tool, does the explain feature in the script AI assistant work for already existing scripts? Short answer is yes there.
Yeah, the answer is yes. And that was what I pointed out. So you can go and get scripts and then bring them into our tool, look at them, understand them, and then modify them.
Yes. And then I believe you can also have it add documentation for even more clarity, should you desire such a thing.
Yeah, true. We didn't try, but you can also have it clean the code and do a few other things.
Excellent. All right. There were a couple of other questions here in the chat. Are there any that you guys wanted to jump onto before I move on to a couple of others I have that were sent in ahead of time? All right.
I'm happy to jump on one here, a couple that talk about Ellucian and Ellucian workflow. So that's a great question. When will this be available for Ellucian workflow customers? So Ellucian delays their release, which is a good thing, right? We don't necessarily want production clients to and they also have to add in their connectors and make sure everything works with their environments. So we want to make sure it's ultra stable for that particular use case. So we don't know the exact date, but they tend to be a couple quarters behind, which we think is a good measure.
Is this version of AI only available for the enterprise version?
Yeah, this is Alex. That's correct. This is only available the enterprise version.
And will you have training on this available? I believe we already have training available on these things.
Training, we have actually a wonderful new training site that I don't think has been yet officially launched, but there is lots of training available. And it is free. The training is free. So we encourage all of our users and prospective partners and integration partners to become familiar with the solution.
Yeah, it actually has been launched. So if you haven't seen it and been there in a while, you should go back and check it out.
Yes. And if you don't want the full training, we even have, if you go to the latest release page of our website, you can see a link to the quick start guide as well, which is sort of a condensed version of the training just to get you started and get a flavor for what's available. Another question that was sent in advance here. What skills are required for professionals to effectively work with AI-powered BPA tools? This might fit nicely with our roadmap and some of the fall and winter release features.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the way we're thinking about this really is that the skill set that's required is, some familiarity with development tools. We obviously don't need to build these processes really, really significant development experience, but a basic ability around scripting would absolutely be useful. From that, we really think that the training that's available through ProcessMaker will give you a very clear view on how to be able to build processes and use the process tools, as well as to be able to build the forms, connect the forms with your process and your forms with your scripts, and to be able to kind of think through your whole process. Of course, we would encourage you to start with the templates so that you're starting from a good starting point, and then of course modify as you go along. So the short answer is some basic knowledge of scripting and some basic knowledge of being able to the basics of computer science around how to be able to build a process would be a great start to be able to build these processes. Over time, of course, we want to be able to get to a place where as a designer you can start with almost no previous skills in the space.
I think this follows up from that answer. Can the AI tool write scripts using variables from already existing processes? So like a new script for a process already in place.
Yes. So you can definitely use it to modify or change a script or create a new script for an existing process.
Okay, I'm going to give one more of our submitted in advance questions here. How does AI contribute to intelligent decision-making within BPA processes?
Yeah. So our view here is that as the next step, and I talked about this a little bit earlier in the context of next best action, is that we will be able to take the way the underlying AI tool works now is that it looks at multiple data points to begin to be able to predict what the next step is. So it looks at multiple data points, usually in the millions of data points of previously written code to be able to generate a new script. So in the same way, obviously not millions, but the idea is to use multiple data points from how previous decisions were made in ProcessMaker to be able to generate what we recommend as the next step. And that's how the AI tool will be able to, take the next step in terms of helping the user make a decision.
Okay. I think that's the end of the questions that I've seen in here. Is there anything else we wanted to address that I missed? All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, we will have a recording of this available on our website, and it will be emailed to you tomorrow with a thank you email for joining us today. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Go on.